Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our HSI Hub webinar focused on institutional capacity. We are, as always, happy to see all of you out there today. I'm Martha Desmond with New Mexico State University and the NSF HSI STEM Hub. This is our second to last webinar for the summer webinar series. Next week, both Dr. Baez and myself are available to answer questions that anyone may have related to grantsmanship, but we will not have a formal presentation. It will just be a question and answer session. Although the summer series will come to an end next week, we will resume workshops in the fall with a fall and winter series that'll take place on the first Friday of each month, and that'll start in October. There will be additional opportunities available through the Hub this fall, and you will all be hearing about them in the coming weeks. Dr. Baez and myself welcome any suggestions you might have for our fall-winter workshop series, and you can send those suggestions directly to both of us. And Edmundo right now is posting our email addresses in the chat so that you know how to reach us. As a reminder to all of you, this webinar will last 1 hour. I think most of you know that. Each speaker will speak for approximately 15 to 20 minutes, and we anticipate about 20 minutes for questions at the end. We've done very well being able to answer everyone's questions for the most part recently. All questions for speakers should be typed in the Q&A box. We reserve the chat for any questions that regarding to troubleshooting or any chat that folks may have amongst each other in our audience. Recordings of the webinars are posted on our portal. Each webinar is available approximately 3 weeks following the live broadcast. You have to join our portal to access them. At the end of the presentation, you will receive a short monkey survey by email, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would take the time to immediately fill this out. This information is important for our program evaluation, and also as an incentive to this, the Evaluation Center at the University of Colorado, Denver is offering a $15 Amazon gift card that they randomly draw from the pool of folks who participated in the webinar. We do have a winner for this week, or for last week, but we have not yet had permission to share their name, so I cannot make that announcement yet. Hopefully next week we'll announce the winner for this week and the winner for next week. This week our speakers are two veterans of the HSI Hub grantsmanship workshops, Dr. Lisel Jones and Dr. Jeffrey Alexandra, both who have presented here before. Dr. Jones is currently Vice President for Academic Affairs at Baltimore City Community College. She started this position in December of 2019. Since arriving, she and her team have submitted a number of grants to do similar projects at Baltimore Community College as they did at her previous institution, which was Union County College. As the Dean of STEM at Union County College, she was one of the PIs on an NSF-funded IRAP grant. The grant allowed them to provide students with undergraduate research experiences at the college as opposed to going off-site to other institutions. They also developed and published an undergraduate research journal for community college students. It is currently going into its 3rd year of publication. She worked closely with the math faculty to develop a program to eliminate developmental math, and in the fall of 2019, the college went fully developmental option. This endeavor was funded by the Department of Education First in the World grant. Prior to coming to Union County College, she was chair and professor of biological sciences. She ran a research lab that examined schizophrenia, and she also ran an NIH-sponsored undergraduate research program, as well as developed a high school STEM initiatives program. Dr. Jones received her PhD in the field of developmental neuroscience from the Medical College of Pennsylvania and Hahnemann University. Our second speaker today is Dr. Alexandra, Jeffrey Alexandra. He is the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Pueblo Community College in Pueblo, Colorado. He received his PhD in history from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Prior to joining Pueblo Community College in 2015, he was Associate Professor of History at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, where he served as chair and also as Associate Dean. Jeff is a Japan scholar by training, and he has published 3 books on Japanese industry, including the motor vehicle, brewing, and pharmaceutical trades. At Pueblo Community College, he supervises 5 academic departments across 4 campuses, spanning the southern tier of Colorado. Programs in his division include biological and natural sciences, mathematics, social sciences, education, English and communication, fine arts and humanities, and criminal justice. He also oversees PCC's STEM Center, where students participate in NASA space grant projects and visiting industry experts. Jeff lives in Colorado Springs with his wife and their 2 unemployed golden retrievers. So let me go ahead and welcome both of them here today, and Luciel will be our first speaker. So welcome, Dr. Alexandra. Welcome, Dr. Jones. You can take the stage and get the show on the way. Thank you both very much.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen and I will start the presentation. Let's see. Let me get, one screen is in the way. There it goes. Okay. So this presentation is titled essentially How to Talk to Your Administrators and to get their buy-in for your contribution so that you can absolutely build capacity at your college. I think the hardest part that most people deal with is how do you work with your administrators? How do you talk to them? How do you get them to be engaged in what you're doing, to find what you're doing to be interesting and have worth for the college? So I put a few slides together to help you with that. The first one is titled, Remember there are rules of engagement, which means the first thing, don't ever try to talk to your dean or your VPA when they're in the hallway or worse, the bathroom. Now, you may think, oh my God, nobody ever does it. I can't even tell you how many times I've had faculty stop me when I'm in the bathroom and say, oh my God, Dr. Jones, I have this phenomenal idea for a grant and I need 6 contact hours of reassigned time. It's really not the best place to engage your administrators when you're trying to get them to come on board with your grant. When you do meet with them, you need to make an appointment. Always remember, just like you, they're extraordinarily busy. So when you come, don't come unprepared. Come with an elevator speech. Why is this grant important to the college? Why is the grant important to the students? How is it going to build the college? How is it going to build capacity? Is it a pipeline that you're trying to build? Is it expanding programs you already have? Is it design of curriculum? What is it about your particular grant that is going to excite your administrator and want to get on board? Do not submit the grant without negotiating your time as the PI. I will tell you, we have a funded NSA grant in our cybersecurity program at my current college. And the faculty member, we got the letter, pulled up the budget, and she said to me, oh yeah, now I need to negotiate reassign time with you. And I was like, well, what do you mean you need to know? You know, so make sure you do that ahead of time, because one of the things that I think faculty forget is that you obligate the college financially with reassigned time. So if that's not put in your grant or that's not discussed beforehand, it's very difficult for your administrators to go backwards and work with you to get that time that you're going to absolutely need to make this grant work. Always keep the conversation centered around the students, how this is going to help the students, how it's going to help the students be successful at your college. And always remember that your administrators really want you to be successful in your grant application. So they're going to want to be able to help you make that grant work and make it work for the college. So these are my thoughts from a PI, a dean, and now as a VPA. I've been all 3, and sometimes I've been both at the same time. Our IUS grant, I was both the dean and the PI on the grant. And the most important way to speak to your administrators is to play to the mission of the college. The college is going to be at the center of your grant, especially if it's a building capacity grant. So it has to meet the mission of that college. So if you're speaking to that mission, your administration is more than likely going to be happy to get on board. They will be able to see your vision. You need to get to them to ask them what you want them to say to you. You want them to say, how can I help you make this grant successful? What can I do for you? That's your door that opens up. That's when they are fully engaged and fully on board with the grant, and they're going to help you. Always bring multiple options. We used to come up with a variety of ways that we could help faculty get time out of their class to do research, to mentor students, to work on the journals, various aspects of the grant, and we were able to find time. If we couldn't find time during the year, we found time over the summer. So you need to have options to help your administrators see how that grant's going to be successful. If they do not ask you to show them your plan, then show your plan for time. What are you going to be asking for? So go back to your elevator pitch. Things that you don't want to say to your administrators. Never say that you can't do this without reassigned time, because I guarantee you they will absolutely challenge you on that. When I was a faculty member, they used to challenge me. As a dean, I used to look at my faculty and say, well, how is that possible? Why do you think you can't do that? And again, you always have to go back to the fact that you're obligating the college for money. And so that's the piece, and I'm going to harp on that one. But that's the piece that most faculty do not understand, is that if we can't charge your time to a grant, then we have to pay for a replacement for you in order to give you time on the grant. And so that is an important piece for you. Always keep in the back of your head. So if you want some time off the grant, or you need these activities to occur, and you need to be able to be released to do something in order to build the grant, then you need to be able to explain how the grant can either help you pay for that, or how you're going to be able to do that in a different way. Administrators always like problem solvers. They like people not to come with the problem, but to actually explain the problem and then provide the solution. The closing pitch. And this is really important, because if you are going to try to run one of these grants, it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. They are extraordinarily worthwhile grants, but you want to make sure that you get everything out there. And then you always have to bring the conversation back to, why is this important for your college? How is this going to build your college? Because remember, that's what the administrator that you're going to speak to, whether it's a dean or a vice president, has to sell to the president and has to sell to the board of trustees. So you need to be able to give them that information. You need to be able to provide them with the how this is going to work, the why this is important, and what you need in order to make all that happen. And if you do that, more than likely your administrators are going to figure out how to work with you. And then, just as a side note, always remember that your administrators are once faculty just like you. And if you help them remember what it was like to be a faculty member, they are going to be able to help you get what you need in order for you to be able to do these grants. Because these grants are so worthwhile and they're so important to all the colleges, but we need to be able to help you get the time you need. And as administrators, we need to be accountable for the money that we spend. And so it's kind of a negotiation. It's kind of a push and pull back and forth between the two areas. And once you learn how to do that dance, because it really is like a dance, you will be able to get what you need on your grant. You will be able to build the capacity at your college and be able to be successful in what you want to do. So I believe that is the end. I'm a scientist completely at heart, which means I'm very direct. I get to the point, and then I'm done. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Jeffrey start his particular presentation. So thank you for your time, and I'll take your questions at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Great to hear from you again. Hope everyone can hear me now. I'm Jeffrey Alexander. I'm the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Pueblo Community College. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And I'll start my slides and we'll talk a little bit about institutional capacity once more. There we are. So institutional capacity is sometimes misunderstood. Folks will sometimes think about it as though it had something to do with institutional size or scale or increasing headcount or increasing enrollment or graduation or something of that nature. And while that might be part of your project, particularly with the Improving Undergraduate STEM Education Program and the HSI schools that are involved, institutional capacity in this case requires a bit of definition. Before I get started, I'll tell you that I'm currently the PI on an NSF grant with this project. This is a preview of a poster that we presented at the required PIs meeting in DC in November last year. And we will put this on the website as well, on the STEM Hub website, so that you can see it later. This is just sort of an overview of the project we're working on in order to expand the awareness of Hispanic students at our college of STEM programs and careers. And these are the steps we've taken to try to do that. We had quite a bit of success in the past 2 years with this program, increasing the number of STEM majors by over 100%, which we were very excited about. So that poster will be available on our website later on. When we get to institutional capacity, the first thing is that this refers to the ability to set and to work toward objectives effectively, sustainably, and with accountability, as Dr. Jones mentioned. Capacity really in this case is ability or capability. And so what we're looking for and what we're trying to define here is the capability of you and your team and your institution to not only win the grant award, but also to implement the project effectively and with sustainability, and also to be accountable not only to the granting agency, but also to the institution and the administration there. It also refers to improving the ability to meet and overcome development challenges. So inherent in this is sort of like the transformative leader is themselves transformed in the process of performing their work and working for the institution. In this case, we're referring to the ability of the team and of the institution to improve itself and improve its ability to deliver upon these grant objectives, because it isn't a straight line. Once a grant project begins, it isn't simply a matter of putting pegs in holes and drawing down the funds. Very often there are bumps in the road, and there are sudden U-turns and things that need to be dealt with. And we'll talk a bit about those later on. Some levels of capacity when we talk about this are individual, institutional in this case, organizational, sectoral, and even societal. Very often government agencies and non-governmental organizations refer to capacity, especially when they're building up programs and getting large long-term projects off the ground. Regarding colleges, of course, our lens is institutional, but that does not mean that the other levels aren't involved. There are lots of other levels here that do influence collegiate capacity, and they can influence the success of your grant proposal and of the implementation of that project. Those influences are manifold. Capacity at the level of the institution is influenced by the capabilities of staff, both individually and collectively. Let's pause for a moment. Let's think about your institution and your college and where you work. Think about the people on your team or teams who are very capable. Imagine who they are. I think you can. Now imagine there's probably some other folks who are, really doing a great job, but they might not be as capable as some of those folks. And perhaps you want to think about building your team and trying to involve some of the most capable people. But that also involves knowing about the internal systems and structures and procedures of your college. Knowing about those in advance, and if you are relatively new to the institution, talking to others to learn about these things. Internal systems and structures such as, do you have divisions, do you have colleges, do you have departments that have to work together? Is there a requirement for you to pursue some sort of green light from the campus or from the college broadly in order to pursue that grant opportunity? Does the grants office need to be notified about that in advance? Is there some sort of permission that needs to be granted? That does happen at some colleges. Some universities are just vast planetary institutions, and if every department all around the university was applying for grants separately, the college would have no way to track this. They would have no idea what their success rate was. And so they encourage all members of the college community to work together with the grants office in order to track who's applying for what and do they need assistance with that budget and so forth. And so these kinds of procedures are important to keep in mind as you're working toward that grant award. External factors are many. They influence the collegiate environment all the time. They include policy, legislation, economy, culture. Imagine COVID-19 and the scale of the global pandemic. That involves all four of these things and many more besides. There are a lot of things we have to think about when we're planning a grant project, and we have to imagine that that project could be influenced heavily by some of these things. The success of any grant that's underway right now is often influenced by some of these, and of course COVID-19 is a very significant example, unfortunately, of that kind of interruption and that kind of influence. Regarding grant projects, these influences can affect the proposal quality and detail and timeliness. We want to make sure that we've assembled a good team. You, perhaps as the PI or a PI with whom you're working, perhaps co-PIs in some cases need to work together to identify some of these influences, some of these obstacles potentially before submitting that hopefully on time. The scope and the relevance and the feasibility and the impact of your project can all be affected by some of these influences, and that's something worth keeping in mind, especially in these times. Project operations and evaluation and reporting can also be influenced. If we have an effective team of professionals who are going to be dedicated to the project, then we're probably going to fare well. If you have a loosely knit team or you are a team of one, that's going to be difficult in many cases. The scale of the operations and of the evaluation may be challenging. Reporting needs to be done on an annual basis, sometimes more frequently than that. And so we have to consider carefully who's involved here, what's the team that's going to be working on this. Do we have the capacity? Do we have enough members on that team? And do we have the support of administration as well? Dr. Jones mentioned we do need the buy-in from administrators, especially if they are going to be committing resources in any way, whether they are institutional resources in the form of a match or some sort of leveraging of existing resources in order to assist the grant. Some grant programs prefer this kind of in-kind contribution. Some do not. That's worthwhile to know about in advance. And talking to your grants officer or grant writer on your campus can be very helpful. Another avenue that I've recommended in the past is to talk to PIs. Talk to current PIs, past PIs. They can be very, very helpful. So when discussing that, and before and when authoring that proposal, talk to department and division and college leadership about ways to maximize capacity. Again, capability, maximize capability to deliver on the grant successfully and to limit the obstacles that are in the way. If you have a difficult kind of structure at your college where things are very distant, siloed perhaps, it can be difficult sometimes to know where the best partnerships may lie. But identifying these procedures and structures that can stymie your goals and either resolve to work with or around them can be very helpful, especially at the planning stages. We do, as I say, need a team of very highly capable participants, and that may include people outside of the unit or the area in which you're working, especially in a grant designed to improve student performance and to attract students to STEM, for example. You may need to work with a variety of different offices and agencies that are not academic per se, but they may be your marketing team. They may be working in your advising office. And sometimes these groups work together really well, and sometimes they butt heads from time to time. That's normal in any collegiate environment, but we do need to identify allies who work in other college areas in order to get their assistance and to enlist their support. If they know about the grant project in advance and they know how it will influence their particular corner of the college, of the university, that can be very helpful. If you are committing an office or a group of offices to do things or to perform certain tasks or to market things for you, and you haven't discussed that with them in advance, it will definitely cause problems later, especially when it comes to budget. But by securing the help of an experienced project evaluator, you can also help to smooth out some of those wrinkles, because an experienced project evaluator, usually somebody who's not at your institution, who has a lot of familiarity with grant writing and with grant management, can help to do that kind of evaluation from afar. And you can maximize the impact of your project and the capacity that you have to deliver on it successfully through partnerships. And those partnerships can, as I say, be in other offices on your college campus or at your college system office. There can be different areas that will lend their assistance. So strategies for enhancing capacity, of course, meet with your partners and allies and leadership often. Talk to them frequently, let them know how things are going. Again, tip them off early if you're seeking to submit something. If you are an untenured faculty member and this is a grant project that you're working on in order to enhance your portfolio and so forth, that's great, and that's of course encouraged. But the institution also needs to know how will that project benefit the college, the department, the discipline in which you work, and how will it benefit students and the mission. Enlisting that team, as I say, by planning to share the wealth. That can be a really important thing as well. The barter economy goes a long way, but money talks. And if you want to enlist the help of another area, such as marketing, et cetera, putting support for their offices into the grant will go a long way. A, they know about it up front, and B, they understand there will be some funding there to help them with that and to ensure that capacity will be available. Talk, as I say, to PIs, grant officers. Negative examples help. That's a great way to break the ice. Tell me about a time that you know of or heard of a grant going awry. You know, what happened? What went wrong? And you'll learn, I'm sure, all kinds of sadly amusing stories about what happens and what is best not to do. As I say, be aware of college structures and procedures, and ask grant officers especially about procurement rules and deadlines. What can you buy, from where, by what time of the year. Fiscal budgets really matter. They tend usually to end on June 30, but not every institution is the same. And be ready to adapt when team members leave. You will find that your team may look a little different come year 3 than it did on year 1, or even when you put the grant in and submitted it from the start. So be prepared to move on. What is your backup plan? Build some redundancy into the plan so that you know who to turn to in the event you lose a key member. And avoid defining the project too narrowly. If you have goals, good. You should have goals and objectives, and they should be clear, and they should be supported by some evidence and some published research that demonstrates this is an effective method for achieving your target. But if you define exactly how you aim to get to that target a little too narrowly, then you'll wind up sometimes boxing yourself in. So rather than pledging to do 8 different things in order to have an awareness campaign, for example, have an awareness campaign and build awareness among students of your programs or the career opportunities, but you needn't specify absolutely every little thing. You can leave that to the budget, and you can leave that to the supplies and expenses budget and so on, and pledge to work with marketing and so forth. I think if your grant officer and the review team understands that you are going to be promoting STEM, for example, that very often will speak for itself. Again, broad strategies therefore permit some flexibility. It also enables new approaches to existing goals. You can imagine that in our program, due to COVID-19, we can't do certain things anymore. We can't have events on the campus. We can't do the same STEM career night we did last October. So we're going to have to adapt, and that's okay. And so that's my piece about institutional capacity. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Lisev, do you want to join us as well? I see there's one question in the chat, but I want to start with maybe something that's a little broader. And maybe from both of your perspective, you can give us a specific example of building an example of what building capacity would be to you in a proposal. And then also if you were interested in institutionalizing that, how you would go about doing it.
So I can go first. So I'm going to actually answer the back piece.
Okay.
Or the front piece. So when you are looking at a lot of these grants that are being run, especially when you do something that involves, and I'll use the example that we had at Union, the undergraduate research and being able to do that on site as opposed to off site. So the way we ended up institutionalizing that, or working to institutionalize that, was allowing faculty to have and get paid for 3 contact hours in the summer to do research. And so continuing that aspect. So instead of paying them to teach a class, you would pay them to do an activity, right? And so that's a piece that has to be negotiated between, you know, in that case, the dean and the rest of the leadership team. And so that's why it's important when you are starting these grants, and I'll go back to the front end, that when you're starting these grants, you get that buy-in from the administration at the beginning so that they understand what your full plan is. Because in order to build capacity, the grant has to be sustained, whatever it is, after that 5-year time period, right? You can't believe that you're going to be able to go on and then get another grant to do the same project for another 5 years. So there always has to have that long-term goal of how this grant's going to work if there's no money. And that's what I always ask when I ask my faculty and my deans when they bring grants to me. How are we going to keep this running after the grant's over? What's the plan? You have too many people that you're hiring on here. How can we better use the people that we already have on campus and utilize their talents that we're already paying them to do a similar job so that we can keep them? And that's usually what I found is the hardest part in sustaining a grant is the salaries that stay in a grant. So if you have a long-term plan, or you're using people, like Jeffrey said in his talk, that if you're using people that you already have, it's easier to sustain something once the grant period is over.
Excellent.
Yes, I would absolutely concur. I think building capacity at the institution does very often involve who's on the team and how you're going to compensate them for their time. You're right. The question of, you know, how can I do this without any reassigned time can be thought about in different ways. And there are other ways to try to compensate somebody. For example, in the project we're working on right now, we have stipends that are paid to faculty members and the director of our STEM center. They are participating as a STEM team. This leverages existing personnel. The stipend isn't lavish. It's $5,000 per year for them, paid over 9 or 10 months. But it is very helpful for getting buy-in and securing their support. Very often people can and will find the time to commit to the project if they're compensated, fairly. And that this is, in terms of a grant project, something that we've managed to do quite a bit, with, in spite of not having the largest pool of money. This is a Track 2 grant, and we're aiming for the Track 1 grant in the coming year. So it's a matter of building toward that and knowing that not everyone, will be able to be part of that team. So we have to choose wisely. And then there are other ways to compensate people who are not faculty members. For example, myself, I'm paid in person months. So 2 of the months that I would ordinarily have been paid by the institution out of general fund dollars, I am paid instead via the grant. But we draw those funds down monthly based upon an hourly timesheet. Now, I haven't completed the timesheet myself as a dean in quite a while. And as a faculty member, I didn't do that either. But here we are doing timesheets, and it's okay. The record is necessary. We have to demonstrate to our grants officer, who will draw those funds down from NSF, that I did something. And so too did the person in institutional research who was helping us. And so too did that administrator, perhaps the administrative assistant, help with the project to the tune of perhaps 1 person month per year. And so that's something that you can write into the grant, and then you can draw those funds down against general fund dollars. That makes administrators very happy when you're not committing general fund dollars to salary and benefits, but instead you're relying upon the grant. And as an 8 to 5, 12-month employee, I'm expected to work anyway. And so I will be working on this project, as you can imagine.
Thank you. Okay. We have a question here that says, Dr. Alexander, how do you find an experienced project evaluator? Doesn't that person need to be paid? Can they be paid before you even have applied / obtained the grant? Before we get going, before you answer this, and I think both of you might have some perspective, I just want to remind our audience too that we had a webinar devoted entirely to this recently, and I don't recall if it's on the portal yet. If it's not yet on the portal, it will be on the portal soon, so you should also look at that for some answers, but maybe both of you have some perspectives you can share related to evaluation, and also how you might tie an evaluator into your institutional capacity portion of your proposal.
Oh, that's a great question. The project evaluator, very often you can find someone like this by speaking to program officers with the granting agency. They are usually able to recommend someone. Your grant officer or grant writer affiliated with your institution, your college, can tell you about perhaps folks with whom they've worked in the past. We managed to, in some cases in the past, work with fellow colleges in our state system and ask, what they have done in the past, and this has been very worthwhile. We found two different project evaluators that way. Each of them was in the Denver metro area. They were happy to help. In some cases, they are too busy, and they're happy to refer us to a colleague, and that has been fruitful as well. Paying them before the grant begins is generally not possible. If your institution has someone on retainer, for example, or someone with whom you work more frequently, they might offer some guidance or advice prior to submitting a project. And your grant writer, him or herself, may also have some advice there. But when you arrange for this person, they are generally able to help out in the early stages of a grant proposal, sort of gratis, if you will, in order to win the contract as a vendor to work with you for the remainder of the project. It's a small investment for them. They may offer some time and some advice, and then from there, you would write them into the grant. And it's a good idea to ensure you understand your procurement rules. What does your HR office require? Does that person have to come on as an employee? It differs by state. May you pay them as a vendor? If so, how do you get an approved vendor status? Again, your procurement officer may have an idea about this. Talk to the finance team, ask around and see who handles this sort of thing. There's always that one magic form that somebody has to complete in order to get that person approved as a vendor. I know at New Mexico State University, it's a very complicated affair. There's a whole web portal you have to log into, and there's an I-9 and goodness knows what else in order to get legit, and then you can be paid as a vendor. I think I might be a continuing employee with them forever. Having done one little thing required that I almost become a permanent employee of sorts, but it's kind of a placeholder, if you will, that enables you then to be brought on as a vendor in a future time. So talk to people, talk to other colleges, talk to colleagues who work at those colleges, grant officers, writers, and they surely can recommend somebody. And then just reach out. It's a matter of a cold call. Hi, I'm here, I work there, this is the project, I understand you do this sort of thing. And if they have experience working in that arena, for example, in STEM or something, or they've worked with a certain agency before, they can be very valuable and very helpful.
So I think that was pretty comprehensive on how to find an evaluator. And I think the webinar was excellent. So I highly recommend you go to that webinar. Most evaluators will write your evaluation plan with you prior to the grant going in and won't charge you because they do charge a lot on the back end. They tend to be very expensive. So you have to remember that when you're putting your budget together. But institutionalizing that is also really important because whatever piece of the grant you institutionalize, you still need to be able to evaluate it and use it. All of the accrediting bodies, regardless of where your college sits, whether it's Middle States, HLC, SACS, all require assessment of everything that you're doing to show student learning, to show effectiveness of something. So what we used in the grant, and I highly recommend this, is that we actually assessed what we were doing. So not only did we have the evaluator evaluate the program and what it was doing, we had an assessment tool that we used separate from that. And that was really helpful. It provided us with a lot of information on what we were doing inside of the classroom and whether that was helping. It provided us information on the students that moved forward for undergraduate research projects. So I highly recommend that you put something in place inside the grant that will help you to continue to assess your program and what you're doing as you build that grant into your college.
Excellent. This next question is for Dr. Jones, and it's that after your project was completed, where did the money come from to pay faculty who continued doing the summer work on that original project?
So they are in their final summer, and I believe it's coming off of institutional dollars to move forward. So in the same way we would pay them as an adjunct to teach, they would get paid 3 contact hours in the summer to do the research. So it'll come off of institutional dollars.
And so just as a reminder, when you're putting your proposals together, you want to think about this ahead of time, because this should be part of your proposal, that this part of the proposal will be carried on long term, and this is how we plan on accomplishing that.
Yes, and then I will say also the supplies come off of the supply, they always did. They came off of the institutional budget for the supplies. That was part of what we had to show NSF that we were willing to do in order to make this work.
Good. Okay. Next question. Would it work to build capacity while collaborating with national laboratories? Perhaps connecting with labs to identify internships and full-time opportunities for students. If that is a possibility, does the collaboration need to be set from the beginning?
I would. I mean, short and sweet. I mean, because you want to be able to have that as part of your grant, right? It'll strengthen your grant if you can show that you have letters of collaboration and that they've agreed to take your students.
And I think it would also be helpful to show that how do you plan to continue this collaboration after the grant is over? What are you putting in place to keep that going?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. When you're talking about partnerships, they shouldn't be temporary. There should be some sort of means of extending that partnership beyond the length of the grant, the life of the grant. We are a 2-year college with a classic junior college model to see students off to a 4-year college program. Our college is 85 years old. You know, that's how many students carried on and went to a 4-year bachelor program once upon a time if they left Southern Colorado and went to the metro area, for example, or Colorado Springs. So, you know, for us, those partnerships are very valuable, and there are good ways of cultivating them in advance. Just as the old adage of, you know, how come I only hear from you when you need something, right? We need to be good at cultivating partnerships, or at least loose relationships in advance, and getting in touch with people, sharing some ideas, suggesting perhaps a pathway for students to matriculate to that program or that college. This kind of thing really makes departments and programs excited about getting new students, getting recruits, possibly working with faculty from another institution on a summer research program, or working with undergraduate students for research. These kinds of things can cement partnerships, and they can be sustainable longer term. We've worked with some of the 4-year college partners in our area on those very kinds of projects. They've benefited our students and our faculty, as well as those of the 4-year campus. That, again, may also require a bit of paperwork. Sometimes, in order to work on one another's grants, one has to be seconded as an employee of the other institution. And so you will have to go and fill out the whole HR rigmarole and do all of that. But it's a short and a brief commitment, but it's really worthwhile in the longer term. The same would be true with national laboratories. I've not worked with any, but again, people there are interested in something more than a passing interest, right? They want to see some manner of sustainability or partnership that would last beyond the life of the grant. And that's sometimes possible in the form of the next grant. And so we might be always thinking about the next project that we're working on with them. And again, that kind of institutional relationship sometimes involves letters of commitment. It might involve letters that are included in your proposal in advance. And sometimes those letters need to be signed by the president of the college or university exclusively. At my institution, the president signs every contract and every letter of commitment of any kind, so that no one is committing the institution to anything without the president's knowledge. And that might be the way your college operates. On the other hand, it might not, but you should know who is the signing authority. If you're seeking support from another agency or another college or a laboratory, and someone's going to sign on behalf of that, it might not just be your department chair or somebody of that nature. You may need to seek the support of an administrator, possibly a VP, maybe even the college president, Possibly your legal office may want to review that. There's a variety of things you have to be careful that you're not committing the institution to. And so, again, talk to people. Just make sure you cross those T's, and I think things will be fine.
Excellent. This next question is for Dr. Jones. And it said, who implemented that tool you just mentioned, the evaluator or the project team? And I think it's referring to allowing the faculty to work on those projects in the summer.
So, so I implemented the tool in order to get them to be able to do the projects on the summer. The evaluation tool that we did inside the classroom was, I can get the name of it. I don't remember it off of hand, but it's an NSF approved test that we gave out of University of Tennessee. I think it was, or Tennessee Tech, but I'll find it. And that was implemented across the STEM areas in the courses that were part of the program. And the college, when I left, was actually looking at using it as part of their Gen Ed evaluation tool. So the college was actually looking at investing in it once they saw how effective it was.
So, and this next question is related to that, and it says, Dr. Jones, where did you include the commitment to continue paying faculty? In what part of the proposal? How is that not considered a match, which is not allowed?
So, right. So it was not a match in the proposal. So the proposal, we drew down salaries. It was a negotiation to maintain the program with the college. And so that they're two separate pieces, right? So when we wrote in the report how we would sustain it after the first year, we had that piece, but it is paid for off of the grant for the 3 years of, or however the grant is. Yeah, so you have to do both. You have to negotiate the sustainability of the grant with your administrators, but you have to show how you're going to pay for it while you're doing the project. So it's two separate items.
Okay. And the tool in the previous question was actually referring to the assessment tool, not the salaries.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get you the name of the assessment tool. I'll send it to you so you can post it on.
Okay. Great. Also, Dr. Baez here was asking a question for that maybe both of you could comment on, and that is related to when you have faculty at community colleges who are so busy teaching, can you provide examples of suggestions on how do you support these faculty on different proposals because they are so busy teaching? Maybe how do we get them, how do we give them some buyout time to work, or even some reward for actually taking that extra effort to working on some of these proposals, even though they're so busy teaching.
So we did all of that. I also had an espresso machine in my office, so I bribed them with coffee. You know, I kept them awake so they could do it. So one of the things that we have at a community college, and you probably have 4 years as well, is that we have summer teaching and we have overloads. And so some of the way that we work with faculty is that we paid them as an overload so they could make a little bit more money, right? So during the academic year, they didn't really, some of them wanted reassigned time and we would give them that, but some of them wanted it as an overload, and NSF allows for a 3-credit overload that you can put into the grant and pay the faculty. And so that allowed them to do it how they wanted and when they wanted. So if they needed to do it on weekends or they needed to do it in the evenings, however they could work with the students, we were able to do that. And so a lot of the faculty wanted that. And that's also a sustainable thing because overloads are part of a normal budgetary situation at a community college, right? Where you may have a requirement. So like we have a requirement of 50% of our courses have to be taught by faculty, full-time faculty. And so in some instances, you may have to provide an overload in order for that to occur. So that was done. We also gave them the pick of the classes. We let them choose their schedule. We gave them higher priority on choosing their faculty teaching schedule. Many of them liked that because they had kids at home. So it's really about talking to your faculty and finding out what's important to them and what they would want in order to be part of the grant. And I'll let Jeffrey speak also on that.
I think we take a very similar approach in that regard. With our project, we had initially proposed to bring someone aboard who could work as a curricular designer and help us with those design projects and the promotional effort to expand student awareness of STEM programs and careers. And the program officer asked us to redesign that and to incorporate more faculty members and to build a team. And so we proposed to do exactly that. And paying those folks a stipend does very often bring them to the table and encourage them to want to be a part of it. In this case, this was the first NSF grant in our institution's history, and it's 85 plus years long. So that was an important milestone for us, and people on our science department team wanted to be a part of that project. And I think that the likelihood that the grant can benefit students will appeal to a great many faculty members who are, especially those who are genuinely interested in benefiting their students' welfare and improving their likelihood of matriculating into a four-year program and finding a career in STEM. So our faculty members and the director of our STEM center have pitched in throughout the academic year, the fall, spring. 2 years in a row now. They've been compensated for that time, but I think that it's a fair trade and they are eager to take part in that. As I say, I'm compensated in person months. I think at one point, one of the members of the team who did not realize that said, wait a minute, you wrote this grant? I said, yes. And that was another way that I can assist the faculty is by doing some of that writing. I'm an historian by training. We can be verbose, but we can also assist where necessary. And so that was very helpful for them. For me, in the summer, to write a grant proposal like that and then bring them into it and involve them in that project, that really helped to see, for them to see that myself as the dean of the division was, interested in supporting that project so much that I would invest that kind of time in order to get it off the ground. I'm not necessarily committing anybody to anything. I still needed their support and their buy-in. So of course we met about it many times, but I think that went a long way to getting the ball rolling and to getting them involved. But when they learned that I was not paid a stipend to do this and that I don't believe it appropriate, I think as an administrator with the college, I'm happy they can offset some salary dollars, but I'm not going to accept a dime myself. And one of them was surprised by that and said, well, you invested all this time, you're not being compensated for it at all. And I told them, no, I'm not, and that's okay. So we find ways to make it work and to, I think, by demonstrating commitment as an administrator, then I get the support of the team in kind. And I think that's worked really, really well in our case.
Excellent, thank you. The next question says, can we always include the letter, ? And I think what this is referring to, and it's a good point, is how do you demonstrate that institutional commitment in the letter? And what kind of letters have you gotten to demonstrate institutional commitment for your proposals?
Jeffrey, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can. I was relatively new on the job a little over 5 years ago when I got a call from a science department chair at a four-year partner institution nearby who said to me, hey, we're putting together this grant proposal for a Title III STEM grant. We'd like some support, and can you send us a letter that says, you're going to send students our way, and we're going to work on transfer and growing our program. And I said, sure, that sounds great. When is it due? And they said, it's due in 4 days. I said, wow, that's super. Why don't I just pen something really quickly and rush it right over to the president's office for his signature? Now, of course, the president was happy to oblige, but that was a bit of a tight window. And they were honest about the fact that they'd sort of dropped that one piece of the proposal along the way. And so time is of the essence. I think by, again, having those relationships early and talking to people in advance, then the letter should, say something to the effect of, this is a partnership between us. We're going to commit faculty to do undergraduate research or students to participate in project X or Y, to work with Professor so-and-so in that lab or whatever it might be. in some cases to set targets. There may even be targets of, 5, 10, 20 students per year who will make their way to that program. Perhaps the receiving institution has some incentives for them. That would be very helpful if it could state that there are ways to try to encourage them, if not a scholarship or some sort of work in a laboratory or an undergraduate research or a graduate student who might be able to help them, et cetera. These kinds of things can demonstrate that there's a sophistication to the partnership, and you're not just sending students off into the void, that there's going to be continuing support for them and for each other. And it wouldn't also hurt to mention if you have a track record of working together in the past on other kinds of projects, what were the benefits to students, to the institution, to the programs, and so on. That kind of depth in a letter of support helps it to ring more true.
So we only used letters of commitment. We didn't actually use any with this particular grant, but in the past we've used them for grants where we might have partnerships. So we put in an NIH Bridges grant, and we had partnerships with 4-year institutions. And so we had letters of commitment there. We have had grants with NSF where the president has written a letter of commitment to support the work that's being done. So it really depends on the grant. And I would also say contact your program officer to find out what type of letter you need. If you need a letter, if you don't need a letter and you send a letter, does it have a negative effect on the grant? So I would reach out to the program officer to find out that information as well.
I think that's really important, because even with NSF, there's some very standard short letters, but it seems that the HSI program really would like more of a commitment, but it would be a good idea to talk with the program officer and know exactly what you can and cannot include in a letter.
Right.
There are 2 questions that are related. One is the 3-unit supplemental rule in the NSF PAPPG, and is the 3-credit overload per, you're referring to a 3-credit overload per semester, correct? And that's for you, Dr. Jones.
I believe the answer to that question is yes, because we had to reach out. So when we had a CTE grant, an NSF CTE grant, and the rules on the PI for that grant were that they could not have an overload and that they were required to be reduced, but could not have more than that. When we reached back out to NSF when we were putting this grant together to figure out how we could pay faculty, that was the information that we were provided from our program officer in regard to how to pay faculty, because as a community college, we don't have a mechanism for summer salary, and we don't have a mechanism other than reassign time. And so that was what we were told for our particular college and for the budget.
Okay, thank you. And I think this is right now our final question. Back on the classroom assessment, how did Dr. Jones find out about this tool? Are there other NSF approved tools that might be helpful?
So I got very lucky. I had a very talented co-PI that knew about the tool. And so I don't know if there are others, but I do know this particular tool was developed using NSF funding, and is a tool that they have, I guess, approved for use. But I will provide all that information. It's actually really good. It's a fun test. It's a test. It's like 15 questions long. You have to learn how to grade it. And I think my favorite question on it is, just to give you an example, because it's a critical assessment of thought test, is 9 out of 10 doctors say that the pain medication is better. And then the student has to say, is that a true statement or a false statement? And then why? What about that is true? Where's the evidence within that statement about the pain medication? And it's amazing. There's one question where the first time you give the test, everybody kills the baby. You'll see it. You have to read the test. You can see it. But there's one question, and every time we'd grade it, we'd be like, oh no, they killed the baby again. But yeah, but it's a really good test, and it works.
Excellent. We do have another question here too. Yeah, and it's, are letters of commitment typically uploaded with the HSI STEM grant application, or are the letters more for internal backup to demonstrate support?
Are they what? Sorry.
Uploaded with the application. And yes, they typically are. You know, if you have letters of support for your application, there is a section to upload. Typically, you'll put them all in one PDF and upload them.
Yeah, that was what we were told to do as well. Yeah.
And I think that's it. Thank you again, both of you. Oh, hold on. Okay, and then we have a comment from Dr. Hernandez, and I'm sorry for overlooking that. Evaluators can be identified through the American Evaluation Association and its local affiliates, and through networking at conferences. Contributions to grants in terms of evaluation plans are often provided by evaluators upon agreement to include them in the grant and utilize them if funded. This subcontract can usually be included as part of the proposal in advance, though it may require that the evaluator is approved as a vendor by the university in advance. So thank you again, Dr. Hernandez. You always have helpful comments in our webinars. So evaluation is a very important part of your proposal, and so everyone should pay attention to this, as well as institutional capacity building, because it's really critically important that you think about how your proposal is going to contribute to your institution and carry forward or move forward in the future. So thank you again, Dr. Jones and Dr. Alexandra. It was a very helpful session, so thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for participating.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Martha. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.